I have pre-show follow-up from my pre-show last week about e-readers. It'll be quick, I swear.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of little things. We got a bunch of feedback on our e-reader episode, or e-reader pre-show last episode.
It felt like an episode, didn't it? Hey-o.
Anyway, I had gotten the latest Kindle Oasis, but apparently the latest Kindle Oasis is from like 2017 or something. And the newest Kindle that's any good is allegedly the new Paperwhite Signature Edition. This is the first Kindle, as far as I'm aware, that has a USB-C port. Although maybe the new Kindle Scribe, the handwriting one, that might have it. I didn't look at that one. It's a little too big for me. But anyway, so everyone said, try the new Paperwhite. It is much more modern, and it's faster, because one of my key complaints about the Kindle Oasis is it just takes forever to do things like wake up from sleep or navigate to a different book or whatever. It takes forever. It's very, very slow. So people said, try the new Kindle Paperwhite. It's much, much faster. I got it. It's not. That's it.
Cool.
And it's also because it's Paperwhite, it has no page turn buttons, and the shape makes it generally less convenient and less comfortable to hold. And you got to dodge a touchscreen and everything. Another small bit of follow-up, John Himmelberger wrote in to say the Kindle Oasis has an option to disable the touchscreens. I had said I would love to only use the page turn buttons and not worry that if I brush my hand against the little tiny edge of the screen that it would turn the page inadvertently, which it occasionally did. This is an option. However, what it does is completely disable the touchscreen, like all touchscreen functionality, until the next time you hit the power button and put it to sleep and wake it back up again.
Oh my gosh.
So that's not a great option. It makes it difficult to do lots of things, so not a great option. I will say the Kindle Oasis, having spent more time with it, I do respect it as a device, but I wish the software was better, and I keep running into problems where it's forced justifying my text and everything. So everyone, the entire world, starting from Jason Snell, but the entire world after Jason, said, just try a Kobo. You will like it better. I decided, fine, you know what? If this many people are saying it's better, I should probably look at it. So just today, my Kobo Sage arrived. It's a little bit larger. It's an 8-inch screen instead of a 7-inch screen, so a little bit bigger size class than the Kindle Oasis and Paperwhite. About iPad mini sized, a little more square, but it has page turn buttons. It's one of 2, I think, current models from them that do. I had said last episode, one of the things I miss when I'm not using a Kindle is I like the PMN Cecilia font that Kindle uses. Well, 2 things. Number 1, everyone said if you want to upload your own font to a Kobo, you can. You can put your own. If you buy a font and have like the OTF or TTF files, you can put them on a Kobo and use that. So I thought that's great. So I instantly bought Cecilia. My Kobo came today. It has that as an option already.
Whoops.
So look, it's a good font. I'm happy to have it for desktop publishing needs and stuff, because I do occasionally do stuff like that. But so it's nice. I'm glad I bought it. But anyway, it already has that as an option, so that's wonderful. I've used the Dropbox integration on it as well. You can get a folder on your Dropbox for Kobo and just drop EPUB and PDF files and stuff in there.
Oh, that's neat.
It works great. It's awesome. The one thing I had said I wanted something to have Instapaper potential, and Instapaper's Kindle functionality is pretty rudimentary. It's not in the greatest shape. Well, Kobo does have native in the device the Pocket app.
Uh-oh.
I haven't gotten desperate enough to use it yet, because there was some bad blood between me and the Pocket guy back in the day. I didn't like him very much. I'm sure he's a fine person, but we didn't compete well. It was not a healthy environment, and so it was kind of like the way John won't buy anything that Microsoft makes. Like I kind of feel like I really don't want to use Pocket.
I'm using a Microsoft mouse right now.
All right, fair enough.
I bought Windows 10 and XP. I think, I don't know, maybe NT. I don't know, a lot of my Windows I got from work.
Well, you still won't buy an Xbox at least.
That's true.
Yeah, but anyway, so. So that's an option. We'll see if I get to it. But overall, I read a lot this afternoon and the evening with the Kobo versus the Paperwhite versus the Kindle Oasis. The Kobo is the nicest. Everyone was right. It is the nicest. It is the best reading experience. Even the buttons are better than the Kindle Oasis buttons. Like the Kindle Oasis buttons, you know how when Apple does something reluctantly and you can always tell? The Kindle Oasis buttons are there because Kindle customers, having previously been accustomed to buttons in previous Kindle models, like the first few generations of Kindles all had buttons, people having been accustomed to that kept complaining to Amazon, hey, all your new Kindles don't have buttons anymore, and it makes it worse. So Amazon said, fine, we'll put buttons on the most expensive model, and you can buy them if you want to. It was a very reluctant move, I think, and you can tell because the buttons are crappy buttons on the Kindle Oasis. In particular, they like snap. You know how like when it's like you click a button, it goes like it's like a loud. Here, I'll play it here. This is the Kindle Oasis button. All right, this is the Kobo button. It's a much softer, more squishy click on the Kobo button, which is nice because when you're reading like in bed or something, the Kindle is actually kind of loud. Like the buttons is kind of loud. And so the Kobo is better, but the Kobo it's way faster. It wakes up from sleep way faster. The menus are faster. Everything about it is faster than both the Kindle Oasis and the new Paperwhite that allegedly is fast. The Kobo is way faster. It is way better setup, way easier. The one major downside of the Kobo, unfortunately, is that their native storefront for their ebooks, for the few things I looked for so far, it both has less selection than Amazon. Like one of the books I wanted is literally just not there at all. And I went to Amazon. I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. They have it. And the Kobo books oftentimes were more expensive. That's kind of a bummer. That like I kind of figured it would be more like buying music, where everyone kind of has the same catalog for the most part, and the prices are all basically the same. No, it isn't that way. The Kobo storefront has less selection and is more expensive, and that's no fun.
But you don't have to buy from the Kobo storefront to read books in your Kobo, though.
Right. So as long as I can get a DRM-free EPUB, or people use Calibre to strip the DRM and stuff. So
that's the way.
I haven't installed Calibre in probably 15 years.
It's still terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't good then.
If you install it today, you will install at least 17 more versions by the end of the week.
Yeah, you just take your whole Kindle library, get Calibre working, spend a weekend on it, rip off all the DRM, and then throw them all to your Kobo world and don't look back, I guess.
Yeah, so my current plan, both of the Kindles are honestly within the return windows. The Paperwhite, they sent me the wrong one. I ordered the without ads one, and they sent me the ad-filled one. I
think you mean special offers.
Yeah, which, by the way, that makes it wake up more slowly. So the Paperwhite...
That's special.
So I hadn't seen a Kindle with special offers since when they first came out, like probably 8 or 9 years ago. I had the very first one that had that, and it would literally just like the sleep screen, like the lock screen on a Kindle. E-ink screens, when they're asleep, they can display something. It just stays there with no power being taken to like keep it there. So when Kindles first came out, they would have artwork of like, here's a bunch of pencils, or something like that. Or later on there became an option to put the cover image of the book you are reading as the sleep screen on the Kindle, so it looked like the book, which is kind of cute, and that's how I keep the Oasis. But so the special offers now, it has this big recommended for you thing. So on the front of my Kindle says 5-ingredient whole food plant-based cookbook, easy recipes with no salt, oil, or refined sugar, 250 reviews, 5 stars. So I'm like, okay, well, first of all, I guess that is kind of up my alley. However, I really and then to wake it up, you have to hit the power button. Wait. Now it's awake. Oh, it's not awake. Swipe to unlock. Then swipe. Wait. Now I'm back at my book. That's how long it took to get back in the book. All right, now, pick up the Kobo. It's been asleep for a little while. Hit the power button. I'm back. Like, that's it. It's so much faster. It's so much nicer. So anyway, thank you, everybody, and especially Jason for recommending Kobo for all these years on all the Six Colors articles that, yes, I have read, actually. I've been following them for all this time. Thank you to everybody who recommended this, and I think I am going to stick with Kobo for the time being. I do miss the Amazon ecosystem in terms of, its selection, and, the pricing is not going to bother me too much because, like, I don't read that many books. If when I do buy a book, it's an extra $5 or $7, fine. But it is kind of a bummer that I can't find everything there. So I will probably venture into the world of Calibre and all that crap, and I wish I didn't need to, because honestly, I would pay more for the better experience. But you kind of can't fake availability. So I'll have to dive into it for that. But otherwise, it's a really good experience so far. I've had it for less than a day, so I really maybe try it yourself, or give this the appropriate amounts of grains of salt that it deserves for having had it for less than a day. But so far, it's really nice. It's more comfortable to hold. Like, it's just everything about it is better designed and more considerate of the user and performs better. Everything except for the store availability. Everything else about it is better. There's better text controls. There's better options. And again, I've had it half a day. I haven't even discovered everything about it yet. But it's already so much better. I've had Kindles for a long time, and I've had many different Kindle models over the years, including the very first one, and actually the very first three. This is so much better than all of them. Hands down, so much better.
Out of curiosity, perhaps we talked about this last episode and I just completely blanked on it, but what are you expecting to read? Are you reading novels? Are you reading technical programming books? Like, what is the target content and media that you intend to consume?
Number one, the most common thing I read is web articles, which I don't love that about myself, but that is the most common. Whenever I want to read a book, I prefer to do it this way. So I very rarely read fiction, but nonfiction. So when there's like a Steve Jobs biography, I read that on the Kindle. I'm currently reading the What If series of books by the XKCD guy, Randall Munroe, which is just delightful. Mm-hmm. And they're actually really good on e-ink because his art style is black and white line drawing. And so it looks fantastic on e-readers. And then I wanted to go back and reread like some old programming books that I read when I was young, like early in my career, like The Pragmatic Programmer, that kind of stuff. Like, go back and read some of those again now that I have a different mind, different perspective, more experience. And I kind of wanted to go back. Honestly, you asked, so I'll bring this up. I really enjoyed the Dao De Ching back forever ago. I read the Stephen Mitchell version, which I know people who are actually experts in this area have very mixed opinions on whether that's like the right version to read. I don't know anything about it, so if anybody out there has like a good version of like, okay, if I don't read the Stephen Mitchell version, what other one should I read as a Westerner trying to understand this? I would love that. So stuff like that, just kind of, I was thinking about rereading 1984, which I know they had a funny thing with the Kindle a while ago where they remote pulled it off devices, which is the best book to possibly do.
That's amazing.
But anyway, so I wanted to get back into reading more than I have been, which is almost none, and kind of rebuild that part of my attention span. And this is a good way to do it. And when I do have something fun to read, this is how I prefer to do it anyway. So that's kind of where I go with that. It's not a lot of novels. That's fairly rare. It's a lot of nonfiction stuff.
That's right. My reading is effectively the exact opposite. I very rarely read for pleasure. I very, very rarely read any sort of nonfiction, which isn't to say I'm right and you're wrong. Not at all. It's just that's not where I tend to look. But I have had a Kindle. I think I mentioned last time. I've had a Kindle for a few years now, since Stephen Hackett kind of bequeathed one to me, so to speak, or handed it down in much the same way that you handed all of yours down, except when Stephen sent mine, he was nice enough not to use it as simply packing material, and instead, used actual packing material to brace the Kindle. But nonetheless, I quite prefer reading on the Kindle, in part because there's a light on mine, so I can read in bed, which I do quite often, even after Errand is asleep. And also because, as I mentioned last episode, my eyes are garbage, particularly when I don't have my contacts in, so I can make the font hilariously big. So I'm right there with you with preferring some sort of e-reader. And although I don't have any particular need to upgrade my Kindle at this time, it sounds like the Kobo is the way to go.
Oh yeah, and also on the screen front, I'm glad you brought that up. All modern nice e-readers have some kind of screen lighting thing, and when these first came out, they were kind of rudimentary. They're a lot better now. The Kindle Oasis one is way better than the Paperwhite one in terms of it's a little bit more even light, although they're both very even. But the Kindle Oasis one seems better at the automatic shift to warm toned lighting and automatic brightness control. It seems nicer. I can get the Kindle Oasis to look nicer than the Paperwhite in that way. The Kobo, I have not yet read with it at night because, again, I've had it for half of a day. But so far, the little bit of testing I have done with it, it's also really nice. It is like Kindle Oasis level of nice as far as I can tell so far. So, again, just super impressed with the Kobo. But, and one other thing, the e-ink screens, they all now, because they are all now touch screens, and because they now have this lighting layer, and I think the way it works, I think they have perimeter LEDs all around the perimeter, and then there's this thin film over the screen that helps diffuse the light in like an even way. So you don't actually really see the points of light, although the edges of the screen look a little bit brighter than the middles. But like the nicer ones will have a bunch of LEDs to kind of help spread it around, nicely, so it looks fairly even. Two major changes since the early days. Number one, the screens are now mostly flush with the front, so you don't have like the little bevel in causing shadows or collecting dust or hairs and stuff along the edges, which is nice compared to the earlier ones. Number two, that film over the top of it makes it slightly shiny, and I don't like that. I wish they were a little bit closer to matte because e-ink looks so paper-like in so many ways, and that's one major way it doesn't. But I think that's a symptom of that film on top that has the touch and lighting layers. I think if you actually look at a raw e-ink screen on a model that does not have touch or lighting, which is kind of rare in the ebook world these days, but still exists in other, you can still buy e-ink devices and screens for Raspberry Pis and stuff like that. They look better in that one way. They don't have this kind of like glossy film over them. So you kind of have to tilt the screen at certain angles to not have that little tiny bit of glare on them. But it's fine. Like in reading, it's totally fine when you do that. But I wish you didn't need to. But that seems like it's kind of an inherent thing with this trade-off right now. So, oh well.
All right. Anything else for your follow-up?
That's it.
Your brief follow-up to your brief pre-show.
Less than 20 minutes this time.
All right. It is that time. It is the last time that I'm going to sit here and tell you it is ATP Store time. I almost said the bad word. I almost said the M word, but I caught myself. It is the ATP Store time. Not to buy adenosine triphosphate. No, it is to buy merchandise. ATP merchandise. Yes, I said it, John. I don't care. You can buy your stuff, your clothing at atp.fm/store. Hey, listen, as I sit here right now, it is Wednesday evening. And this coming Saturday evening, so probably within 24 to 48 hours of when you're hearing this, it will be closed. The store will be closed. So I will remind you one final time. If you're walking, stand off to the side where you're not in the way. If you're driving, signal because you're not a jerk that doesn't use your signal, right? Signal and pull over. Or think about what you're going to do when you get where you're going and go to atp.fm/store and buy you some awesome stuff. I'm so scared to say the M word now. You've ruined me. Buy some awesome stuff.
You can say merch. It's just not called the merch store because it has a name.
So sorry. All right. So the merchandise/merch/stuff that you can buy, the Mac Pro Believe shirt, which we actually have a little bit of follow-up about that, believe it or not, but we'll get there in a minute. You can buy the Mac Pro Believe shirt in various colors. The shirt themselves can be various colors. And then we also have the classic ATP 6 colors logo, which is on top of various colored shirts or black. Depending on what color shirt you buy, it's either white ink or rainbow ink. Then we also brought back the Pro Max Triumph shirt, which is available in a rainbow of colors on either black or white tee. And we also brought back the polo. You are welcome, those of you who have a real job and want to look a little snazzy for it. Buy yourself an ATP polo. It's really, really nice. And we also brought back the ATP hoodie. As far as we know, we also still have a smattering of the original red inside mug available.
No, I think the mugs are all gone now.
Breaking news, the mugs are gone. You waited too long.
Yeah, there wasn't that many of them. They're all gone now.
The mugs are not available. So anything else, all of that other merchandise/stuff you can buy at atp.fm/store. That's where you can go. Hey, John, if you're a member, do you get any special perks for the ATP store?
I can't answer you. I want to double check on the mugs. Hang on a second.
Important things happening.
Okay, yeah, no, the mugs are. I was trying to read the admin dashboard where it showed how many there was, and it was confusing. But if you go to the mug, you'll see that it just says, let's see, it says bring it back. Yeah, they're both gone. Okay. Yes, members. If you're an ATP member, you can go to your member screen. Actually, just go to atp.fm/store, and there you'll find all the links you need, and you can get a discount code for 15% off. And if you're not a member, you can become a member, get the discount, and then forget to cancel your membership.
I highly endorse this approach. Also, remember, as we discussed in the after show last time, that if you are a member, you can go to your member dashboard or whatever we want to call it and find a link to the Callsheet test flight, which is just for members. So you can check that out as well. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the store. So again, it is currently Wednesday. What day of the month is it? It is the 3rd, Wednesday the 3rd. You probably won't hear this until Thursday the 4th or maybe even Friday the 5th. At the end of the day, Saturday the 6th, your time is up. I don't want to hear you say, is it too late? Yes. If you have to ask, it's too late. So, atp.fm/store. We love you. Please love us back and buy some merchandise. We would really appreciate it. John, we have some follow-up with regard to merch. This is a new thing for us. I don't think this has ever happened before. So please tell me about the Mac Pro Believe shirt.
So someone named Christopher Cruz wrote in with a devastating email. Devastating.
Well, in Christopher's defense, it was not written to be devastating. It was written in a happy, helpful way. It just so happened to be devastating.
Yeah, so I'll read from the email here. Talking about the Mac Pro Believe shirt, right? And we have what we call a dark version of the shirt, which means that the shirt itself is dark. Anyway, so Christopher says, the dark version of the shirt suffers from one of my graphic tee pet peeves, the same artwork being used for light and dark shirts with only an ink color change. This treatment results in the dark version of the shirt appearing inverted. If it's not too late, it may be worth considering adjusting the artwork for the dark shirt. Now here's the deal. We've been doing the t-shirt things for a long time. I'm very often the one who does the artwork for them. When it's something like the ATP logo, where it's got 8 letters ATP, right? So you got a white t-shirt, you want to put ATP on it, you write ATP in black on your white t-shirt. No big deal. And you're like, but what if I want a black t-shirt? You can't put black ink on a black t-shirt, although we did do that once. But, you'd want to put white lettering. So I'm going to just take the ATP that was black on the white t-shirt and just change it so that now the ATP is white on the black shirt. Problem solved. This has been our MO for all of our shirts. Depending on how dark or light the shirt is, usually we go with white ink. If it's a monochrome thing, we go with white ink on the dark shirts and black ink on the light shirts. Easy peasy. I did exactly the same thing with the Mac Pro Believe shirt, which is, again, some artwork that I resurrected that I had done way back. I did it on the white shirt first because that was what I originally intended. And so we got to have one with some dark color shirts too. And for those, I'll just change the ink color to white ink and it'll be fine. And we rolled out the store and we said, everybody come and buy it and blah, blah, blah. And then this email came. And I was like, wait a second. Christopher is right. Oh my God, he's so right. So here's the deal. The Mac Pro word believe, sure. Black ink on the white shirt, white ink on the black shirt. Works great. The picture of the Mac Pro itself, that's not text. That's a physical object. And unlike text, physical objects have a physical reality. They're not just an abstract concept. And the physical reality of the Mac Pro is that the little holes in the front of it, those are the dark parts. So on the white shirt, everything works out. If you look at the white shirt, you can see, oh, here's a Mac Pro, and look at all these holes in the front of it. And inside the holes, it's dark and spooky. And so black ink is used in the holes. But when I made the one that goes on the dark color shirt with white ink, I just inverted it. And so what that meant was with the white ink on the dark colored shirt, the holes had white ink in them. The holes were bright and the case was dark. I had one person say it actually kind of looked like the Mac Pro was black and it made him wish for a black Mac Pro. But the thing is, the Mac Pro is not black. It's silver. It's light colored and the holes are dark. I was like, oh my God, he's so right. And I was like, what are we going to do? We already shipped the store, whatever. So I just spent like an hour and a half making the corrected version. And it's not that easy to make the corrected version, especially when you don't use the vector programs that often. Like, I know enough about vector programs to know what should be possible. I just don't know how to do it. So there I am in the new version of Affinity Designer, trying to figure out how to do the conversion of all my vector things. I eventually figured it out. I knew it was possible, but it was just tricky. Although, an aside here, I did find a reproducible bug in Affinity Designer 2. And it's like, well, who cares? You got a bug. It was stopping me from doing the thing. What I had to do was I had to select a stroke and select a command in Affinity Designer called expand stroke. There's no way I could avoid doing this. There was no other way for me to do it. Every time I selected expand stroke, it would crash instantly. Oh, no. And I had to do this for like 50 strokes. And I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I literally don't have a workaround. Like, I need to expand the stroke. And every time I select the command, the app immediately crashes, just instantly. So eventually I figured out just from futzing around that if I like I was looking at the crash log and it was like a seg fault in some shared memory segment. I'm like, oh, shared memory. I know this from my server side days. There's lots of crap you can do to perturb what's going on in that memory region. So I was like zooming in and out in the program, scrolling around, doing all sorts of stuff. And 1 out of every 10 times it would work. And so there I was. I would launch the program, select expand stroke crash, launch the program, select expand stroke crash. But 1 in every 10 times it would work. And then I would hit save. And then I would just repeat that process. So anyway, eventually I did it.
You should have tried this on Tina's computer. I bet it would have worked better.
I actually should have done that. If I hadn't been so heads down into doing this, I should have brought other, because like something like an architecture change, or because it was one of those things where it's like some kind of memory corruption or buffer overflow. And it's just the luck of the dice, whether whatever bad was happening, it was harmful or not. And it was harmful like almost all the time, but not all the time. I should actually save the file and give them a reproduction or whatever, but I was just like, I don't have time to reproduce this. I just need to get done with it. So the upshot is, I contacted the people at Cotton Bureau, said, hey, we want to update the shirt. We think this one looks better. It's basically the same design. It just looks better. Doesn't look like it's inverted anymore. And they were nice enough to swap it in for us. So if you ordered the Mac Pro dark shirt, everybody who ordered it is getting the good version. Nobody is getting the bad version. If you liked the bad version because you thought it looked like a black Mac Pro, sorry, but that's not what we were going for. It's just supposed to look like the actual Mac Pro, and now it does. One final thing I will add that I did notice, so people don't write in and tell me about it. I did notice, but I think it's actually better this way. If you two can look in the show notes where you have, it might be chapter art for this thing if you're looking at the podcast. But anyway, look in the show notes, please, and take a look at the quote-unquote good versions, both the light and the dark one. Do you see what else is wrong with the good versions?
Is the shimmer not right?
No.
On the handle?
No, I did that intentionally as well. Like I could have reversed the handle. I think the handle looks better this way.
Okay.
Anyway.
I mean, other than the fact that it looks like aliens on the top row, which I've said to you and others have said as well.
Yes, many people have said that.
I mean, the real Mac Pro really does look like aliens, so I think that's accurately drawn.
Mm-hmm. No, it totally is. This image is drawn directly from Apple's,
Are the holes not like is the polarity of the dark and light inside each hole, is that backwards?
That's right. If you had a real Mac Pro in front of you, you would know this. On the real Mac Pro, the alien eyes, those are the parts that are dark. And so I did one like that. The problem is if you do it like that, like this is an example of like, I think the shirt looks like what people think the Mac Pro looks like, but that's not what the Mac Pro really looks like. What it really looks like is the eyes of the alien are dark and the other ones are silver, but then you don't have a good way to differentiate the silver thing. So I'll show you what it looks like with it the other way. I'll just put this in Slack.
Yeah, I feel like you wouldn't be able to see like where the holes begin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like this as much, for sure.
It looks more like the Mac Pro, the way that you're showing us now.
But it doesn't look good on a T-shirt.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the artistic license where we are, the problem is it's line art, and there's no real good way to show where the holes begin with a line, because there's not a line there. There's just literally an edge, but we can't do subtle shading like that. So it turns out that was a happy accident where I did realize that the other way would be more accurate. In fact, I had one. The other thing you don't know is there's a hexagonal grid behind the eyeballs. And I have that hexagonal grid in my vector file, and that just makes it way too busy. But technically speaking, that's correct. So consider it an iconified version of the Mac Pro is what is on the shirt. It is not technically accurate, but it is spiritually accurate. So there you have it.
We are sponsored this week by Hullo Pillow. Have you ever tried a buckwheat pillow? This is totally different from like fluffy feather or fill or memory foam pillows. I tried this a long time ago from a podcast, and my wife immediately stole it, and so I didn't get much time with it. And then a couple years ago, I started having neck and shoulder problems, and I switched to the Hullo because the way it supports your neck is totally different. It's kind of like a giant beanbag full of these buckwheat hulls, so it feels almost like you're sleeping on like a supportive beanbag instead of like a squish foam kind of feeling. What's great about it is not only is it very supportive, but also you can move the fill around. You can kind of form it to however you want it to be that moment or that night or whatever. And so it's so much more supportive, and it's great. It was wonderful for my neck problems. I think it really helped me a lot, honestly. It's been wonderful. I love Hullo. Other benefits as well. So, for instance, because it's full of these kind of loose-packed hulls, it stays very cool and dry compared to pillows filled with feathers or foam, so it doesn't like retain heat. It's really nice in the summertime, honestly. And you can kind of customize it to whatever level you want too. So if you want like a lot of support, like a lot of height, you can do that. You can unzip the bag that's inside of it and just pour out or add more buckwheat hulls. They sell bags of it if you want to like refill it or really stuff it full even more. It's wonderful. I'm so happy with my Hullo pillow. I strongly suggest you try it. There's so many other benefits. It's made in the USA. They donate 1% of the profits to the Nature Conservancy. Like, it's a great brand selling great pillows. So here's the deal. Sleep on it for 60 nights. If Hullo is not right for you, just ship it back. They'll give you a full refund. See for yourself at hullopillow.com/ATP. If you try more than one, you get a discount of up to $20 per pillow, depending on the size. Every order is shipped fast and free. So once again, check out Hullo today. hullopillow.com/ATP. Thanks to Hullo for sponsoring our show.
Let's talk about Callsheet. I briefly mentioned earlier that if you are an ATP member, atp.fm/join, then you can get on the beta until the app is released. I don't have a timeline for that quite yet, but hopefully soon. Once the app is released, the test flight will be shut down. A couple of quick notes. First of all, a few people have asked, hey, I'm getting challenged for a subscription. What happens? Well, first of all, you shouldn't be, because I am trying to rip all that out and it will go back in later. My whole paywall situation is a mess right now. But if you are on the test flight, you can go ahead and tap I don't even remember what it costs right now because I haven't looked at it in forever, but you can tap whatever button that's there for subscribing, and it will churn for a second. Then there'll be an Apple provided dialog that says, something, you won't be charged for this. And it'll say the word sandbox somewhere in the dialogue. As long as you see the word sandbox, and it should say you won't be charged for this, you can go ahead and send it through. You still have to enter your, real password, but you can send it through and it's not going to charge you. That will not carry over to the real version. You will have to subscribe, for if you so choose, once the app is in the App Store proper. I'm sometime in the next day or two, I hope to rip out all the paywall stuff until I can properly sit down and re-implement it the way I want to. But just FYI, you are free to spend as much money as you want, because I will see none of it, and nor will Apple. More importantly, though, everyone has been really, really kind, and I really, really appreciate it. I think of all the feedback I've gotten, and there's been quite a bit, and it's almost all been extremely kind, and I really, really appreciate that. I think there's been like maybe one or two people that are like, this sucks, which I'm really happy with. Like, I am super happy with that level of happy to unhappy. And that is not a challenge. If you don't like it, to tell me you don't like it. You can keep that to yourself. But I wanted to thank everyone who had sent in a little bit of feedback. I really appreciate it. I am still, working fast and furious. Breaking news earlier today, my friend John, who is the author, or one of the authors of the Excellent App Channels, former sponsor, he pushed me to implement a URL scheme for Callsheet, which I've done. So if you fancy putting stuff into a shortcut, I'm not sure why you would, but hypothetically, you can open up Callsheet from a shortcut. And in his app, Channels, I don't know if it's available to everyone yet, but coming soon, you will be able to open stuff in Callsheet if you have Callsheet installed, which I thought was super rad. So thank you to John for that. But I do have a call for help. If you are familiar with SwiftUI and have used SwiftUI's searchable modifier, this is what I use on the main screen in order to allow you to search for stuff. Everyone has told me, and it's justifiable because they're all correct, hey, this, what a lot of people call floating action button. Basically, if you haven't used the app, as you drill into, movies or shows and actors and actresses and so on and so forth, as you do that, there'll be a little magnifying glass that kind of floats in the bottom right as a kind of escape hatch that will jump you back to the search screen. And everyone justifiably expects that when you hit that, it will scroll to the top of the search results screen. It will highlight the text that was already there, and it will show the keyboard saying, all right, what do you want to search for now? Completely reasonable. Completely reasonable. I wish I could do it. But as far as I know, I can't, because SwiftUI doesn't give you any kind of control or ability to focus the search field. So if I'm wrong, please tell me. If there's a way to do this with only mild hacks, please tell me. I really don't want to have to pull in, I forget the name of that framework. Is it introspection? Something like that. There's some framework that's very popular that lets you dig into the UI kit stuff.
You don't want to do that.
Exactly. Well, I think I'm going to have to if I want to make this work at all, but I don't want to pull in an entire library just to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I'd rather just do this by hand if need be. So if you have a way to make a SwiftUI search field as implemented by .searchable, if you have a way to focus that, and even better, if you have a way to highlight stuff in the text field there, please let me know. Please reach out. I would love to know a solution to this because it drives me nuts. It's driving everyone else nuts. I totally understand why it's driving everyone nuts, but I don't think there's anything I can do about it. So that is my plea, my call for help. If you know anything about .searchable and can give me a tip on that, please let me know because I would like to know this before I have to complain about it in a lab at WWDC when they're probably telling me tough nuts you can't. So, but all in all, things are moving forward. I'm getting to the point that I need to steal a copy of _, no new features, time to ship banner. But I keep coming up with things that are surprisingly easy to implement. And so I keep doing them, like the URL scheme earlier today. So somebody stop me. Otherwise I'm going to keep doing this forever. But my hope is, I got to fix a couple of things that are kind of urgent. And then maybe early next week, I'm going to conquer the paywall stuff and make that look and work the way I really, really want it to. So that's what's going on in Callsheet /FlukeUp land. I don't know if you two have anything to add or any questions, but otherwise we can move right along.
The one thing I will add is your issue with the search box thing. Mm-hmm. This is SwiftUI. This is the brand new cutting edge way to have a buggy, frustrating search box. But UIKit programmers have known for a long time the joys of things like UI Search Controller. And before that, I believe it was called UI Search Field. There have been a few different versions of this over the years, and they have all been just absolutely miserable to deal with. Like they all different layers of different kinds of bugs, different lacks of customization, different types of hacks required to make it good. Like it is the whole like UI Search Controller family of features to put that search box into the navigation bar or near the navigation bar in an iOS app over the entire lifetime of iOS as a platform have just been horrendous to use for developers. And so this, if you're running into a little gotcha or a small shortcoming of the newest version of, the SwiftUI version of this, I'm simultaneously, disappointed once again, but also completely unsurprised that the stupid search box once again is causing problems for iOS developers.
Well, and the funny thing about it is, in the defense of SwiftUI for just a moment, it was literally, putting at the end of my view, I did this a couple of weeks ago, but, putting at the end of my view .searchable and connecting it to a binding to a string. And that was basically all it took. And then magic happened, which was awesome. No joke. It was awesome. The problem, and this is SwiftUI from top to bottom, doing that really hard thing in a basic way was cake. It was so easy. It was astonishingly easy. But the second you want to make it do anything else, then you're up a creek and you have to go diving into UIKit. Because, maybe there is a way to do what I want without diving into UIKit. I suspect I'm going to have to go spelunking into UIKit world, which, like you grumbled about earlier, and I completely echo it, I don't want to do that, but this is one of those situations where I might have to because I'm breaking the expectation of everyone that uses the app. So it might be, that juice might be worth the squeeze. But it's just, that's the worst thing. Marco and I were kind of fetching about SwiftUI before the show. In so many ways, it is so amazing, and I love it so much. But, you were fighting hilarious errors earlier today. I didn't happen to toot about it, but I was also fighting differently hilarious error messages earlier today. It's so amazing what one can accomplish with SwiftUI. And I like to think that, Callsheet's looking pretty good. It's not amazing, but it looks pretty good. And that's, in part because I've had help from a bunch of different people. Hey, you should tweak this, do that. Most especially I want to call out friends of the show, Ben McCarthy and Craig Hockenberry, both who have given me a lot of really great, really actionable feedback about this. But even the stuff that I came up with, I can make look pretty good. And I was never that way with UI kits. So there's so much great stuff about SwiftUI, but golly, the second you want to go off the beaten path, you get punished. And that's where I am right now.
Yeah. SwiftUI, my experience continues to be, wow, I really like this much of the time. This is definitely a great way forward. Doing things any other way now, like if I have to go back and modify some UI kit code for in smaller things that I'm working on, it feels like I'm going to the dinosaur age. Like it feels so primitive and clunky compared to what I can do in SwiftUI, and the speed at which I am able to try different ideas out in SwiftUI is so absurdly fast and satisfying and productive. It is by far my favorite way I've ever made UIs before. Not even close. It's by far my favorite. And I'm investing fully in it for the future.
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Comma. However, yeah, it is full of sharp edges, and it's like many Apple products. Many Apple products are amazing and the best in their class, and yet have some sharp edges. Not physically, of course. Usually, Johnny Ive was sure to sand down all those sharp corners and
the chamfered edges.
That's right. Yes, right. Yeah. So that's fortunately not in the physical sense, but there are so many little sharp edges on SwiftUI, some of which are just outright bugs, like Apple products, many of which are design decisions that are just very opinionated, like Apple products, and many of which are just shortcomings they haven't gotten to yet, like Apple products, and so it fits in perfectly to be the new way to build things for Apple, because it really fits the attitude, and most of the time it's great. And again, I don't want to switch to anything else. But when you hit one of those walls, oh boy, it's fun. Mm-hmm. and so far, and again, UIKit had tons of those things too. They were just different. In many cases, very different. But what I have found, for whatever it's worth, over the years, oftentimes I would slam into a UIKit wall, and I would say, no, it has to be the way I want. I have to be able to achieve the behavior or appearance that I'm going for here. And so I would build some kind of ridiculous hack that would make it happen. Over time, I have come to realize I have regretted almost every time I've done that. And the way I'm building it now is I'm trying as much as possible, which is hard with SwiftUI, but I'm trying as much as possible to avoid needing to do hacks like that, to try to keep things simpler and more fluid, more dynamic, more stock. And if SwiftUI is not letting me customize something, to just say, oh, well, I guess I won't customize that thing, as opposed to, well, now I have to rebuild UI table view or whatever. It's like instead of jumping immediately to let me force my way into this behavior that I want, even if it's going to require 10 times the code, saying instead, you know what, I'll just accept that and move on to a bigger problem. Part of that is maybe just me being old, but I think part of that also is hard learned wisdom. Like I've done this a lot. Currently Overcast's current screen structure, which is all Objective-C and UIKit, it is really hard to change anything about it. It's super hard because it's really convoluted, really complex code, because I was really picky about exactly every detail of how I want this to look, how I want this to work. I want to be able to put this up here and put this icon over here and put this bar up here. And it is so complex that I stopped touching it for a year and then lost the ability to ever touch it again. So I'm much more heavily now leaning into simplicity, flexibility, and SwiftUI is great for that. Like, it's not great in terms of with UIKit, if something wasn't quite what you wanted, you had more options to hack it than you do with SwiftUI. SwiftUI it puts up taller walls. Mm-hmm. It's a lot harder. Like certain things you just can't hack. It's like, oh, you want to customize the way this thing looks or behaves? Too bad. You got to drop down to UIKit at best if you even have that option. But overall, though, I've learned over time, minimize the amount of convoluted, complicated UI customization. And SwiftUI is really good if you want to stay on the default path. And if you want, heck, even for customization, in many ways, many things that you can customize with SwiftUI were extremely difficult to customize in UIKit or impossible.
Yep.
And so many things are actually way easier to customize. But I'm not saying you shouldn't customize, looks and feels and stuff here and there. What I'm saying is, when it gets hard, just bail out and just don't do it. So when something gets complicated, like, oh, well, I could change this animation to be this other kind of animation that's nicer if I write this whole component from scratch and move this thing over here and have all these weird modifier exceptions and everything. It's like, okay, well, or you can take the regular animation with this one line of code that looks 80% as good and move on with your life. What my customers want from me is not that one perfect animation. What they want from me is all the features they keep asking for that I can't do because I'm buried under the weight of my hacky UI.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. And you said earlier, am I just getting old? I don't know. I think for me, age is barely distinguishable from pragmatism or pragmatic. As you get older, you just realize that a lot of the things that we think are worth it, I made the play on words earlier, the juice just ain't worth the squeeze anymore, that it's just not worth it getting the last 20%, as you had said a moment ago. You can get 80%. You know what? That's sufficient. And in this particular circumstance with the search thing and the floating action button, the only reason I'm even considering dropping down to UIKit and trying to do some of that just absolute nonsense is because it is such a fundamental piece of the app and I'm breaking expectations. Well, I would argue SwiftUI is breaking expectations, but to a customer, that doesn't matter, right? The point is that my app is breaking their expectation. And it stinks that I'm hearing the same feedback over and over again, and nobody's being mean about it. They're not being turds or anything. It's just, hey, why doesn't it, when I hit the little, circle magnifying glass thing, why doesn't it show the search box? Isn't that the whole point of the magnifying glass? Well, yeah. Well, then isn't it just basically a home button? Well, yeah. It's not what I want, but that's basically what it is. And so, yeah, it's frustrating. But I mean, ultimately, almost all of PikaView was UIKit. Very little was SwiftUI, and this was written when SwiftUI was new. Almost all of Masquerade is SwiftUI, and very little is UIKit. And so far, literally all of Callsheet is SwiftUI. And one of the things that's been nice to hear, which is, I think, in no small part because of how freaking fast the movie database is, but so many people have commented, wow, this is so fast. I think that's also helped by the fact that IMDb is slower than dirt. But, all of these factors are coming together, including that SwiftUI is pretty quick in my experience. All of these things are coming together to make my app look really, really fast, which is awesome. And certainly I've been able to write it much quicker than I would have UIKit. I started Callsheet in late January, and based on the accomplishments that I have, if I would be in probably January of next year if I was writing this all in UIKit, you know what I mean? Like, it would have taken me so much longer. And so in so many ways, I'm so happy with SwiftUI, but golly, it's so difficult when you want to do something that just isn't officially supported.
We are brought to you this week by Trade Coffee. If you've been getting your coffee from the grocery store and drinking the same coffee every day, try something even better. Trade Coffee. Trade is a coffee subscription service that partners with over 55 of the nation's top-rated independent roasters, offering over 450 unique roasts that can be delivered fresh to your doorstep on your own schedule. Trade Coffee is a coffee subscription service that makes it super easy to discover new coffees and get fresh coffee delivered to you so you can make your best cup of coffee at home every day. I have personally used Trade, and I am blown away by how great their recommendations are and how great the quality is of the coffee that I get from them. It is just wonderful, and the variety you get is really quite something. They partner with the nation's top independent roasters, so they send you great quality coffee handpicked by their coffee experts. And so whether you already know what you like and you have very specific tastes, or you're new to specialty coffee and you might need some help or recommendations, either way, you can do that with Trade, and they have great ways. They have recommendations, they have great picks for you, and they make it easy and convenient for you to select exactly what you want and discover new coffees. And they will send it fresh to your home on whatever your preferred schedule is. So it's, if you want a bag every week, great. If you need to skip a week because you're going on vacation or you have too much built up, don't worry about it. It's super easy to do all that. So upgrade your morning routine with better coffee. Right now, Trade is offering you a free bag of coffee with any subscription by going to drinktrade.com/ATP. That's drinktrade.com/ATP for a free bag of coffee with any subscription purchase. drinktrade.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Trade for keeping me caffeinated and for sponsoring our show.
Emil Jensen writes, I use the following shortcut to add the tag of #2FA in the notes field for the iCloud keychain entries that have two-factor codes. That way, I only see the sites that have 2FA. This doesn't work on Mac OS, of course, because sad. But nonetheless, you can do, and we'll put this in the show notes, prefs : root equals all uppercase passwords. I don't know if that matters or not, but it is all uppercase here. Ampersand search equals 2FA. And so if you are diligent about putting that tag in the notes field for your iCloud keychain entries, then here's a quick way to get to two-factor codes.
This is related to when I was talking about the Google Authenticator. I still use it because when you launch the app, all your two-factor things are just right there. But if you go to passwords and settings and iOS and the iCloud keychain, you see all your passwords. And then you have a search field and you have to search and blah, it's kind of annoying, right? if you do this, if you are diligent about going through all of your passwords that have two-factor, which is not easy to find because, it's a chicken egg problem. You can't find them because you have nothing to search on, I think. But if you do this, and then you create a shortcut that opens that URL that we'll put in the show notes, that prefs:/root equal blah, 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 then now that shortcut will take you to immediately into the settings app, into passwords, into a search that just shows you the passwords that match 2FA. You still have to dig into one to get the two-factor code. So Google Authenticator is still faster because they're just right there and you just tap on them and you're done. This is one extra tap, but it is pretty good, especially if you're not already overwhelmed with the number of passwords and you kind of know which ones are two-factor. I was trying to implement this. I was like, which one of these 700 passwords have two-factor? And I just picked a couple off the top of my head that I knew, but there's so many more that are in there that I'm kind of buried. But it was a good idea and it works. And there probably is a way to do it on macOS. I just don't know there is like a URL scheme, I think, for getting into system settings or whatever. I just don't know what it is.
Malad Serchik writes, having CarPlay available in rental cars is essential for me. In just a few minutes, I can connect my phone and have all my favorite apps and features ready to go. This includes Waze, music apps from my playlist, and communication apps like WhatsApp and Zoom. Without CarPlay, I'd need to spend time learning and setting up the in-car navigation and entertainment system. Additionally, privacy concerns arise when people forget to clear their profiles from the car. This was an excellent point. The only thing that kind of chaps my bottom about this is, if I remember right, and I understand why, but if I remember right, every single car has a different home screen in CarPlay. And so if I were to plug into the Volvo as opposed to connecting to my Volkswagen, all of my apps have been rearranged and resorted and so on and so forth, which is really frustrating. I get why they do that because for some people that's a feature, not a bug. But for me, it's a bug, not a feature. Nevertheless.
Is that why that happens?
Yeah, it's per car. I'm almost sure.
Oh, because I've just noticed that it just randomly shuffles up my stuff sometimes. And I never really figured out. I just assumed it was a bug, the same way it randomly shuffles my Safari tabs every time I reboot my computer.
Well, no. It should be consistent within one car. So if it's getting reshuffled, then yes, you did find a bug. But as you go between cars, each individual car should remember its own CarPlay home screen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'll pay more attention next time.
Yeah. So, but leaving that aside, I think Malad's point is absolutely accurate, and I feel the exact same way. Now, granted, I am not in a position that I rent cars very often, but it is real nice. Also, it's super nice if I'm driving Erin's car, like just by myself, which doesn't happen often, but does happen. I don't need to have my phone as a secondary Bluetooth device on her car. I don't need to do anything. I mean, yes, her car does support profiles and things, and I might be able to associate my phone with only my profile and my physical key and so on and so forth. But it's so much easier to just plug in my damn phone, and then suddenly her infotainment system is my infotainment system. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree with this more. Dave Nichols writes, in all the discussions around CarPlay and the manufacturers not providing it, I've heard lots of comments relating to the manufacturers wanting to make money from subscriptions, but I haven't heard anyone talking about the cost of CarPlay to the manufacturers. Is this because Apple provides it for free? That seems unlikely. Is there any indication of the cost? In their push for services revenue, has Apple increased that cost lately, perhaps on the back of all the new features that they've announced? One of us, and I'm assuming it's John, put in a very helpful link from 2019 to The Verge, where they said, Apple says it doesn't charge automakers a fee to use CarPlay.
I would imagine there's got to be some kind of certification process,
right?
Though.
That's exactly what I was going to say, and that can't be easy.
But if it's different than having a per car fee.
Yeah, maybe there isn't a fee per vehicle, but I'm sure you have to pay Apple to certify you and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. But that's a one-time cost, and that's nothing to car makers. So I guess the question of if Apple was Oracle, they would say we get a percentage of the total sale price of every car you sell. Because that's how Oracle does business.
Yeah.
Indeed. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. And as Marco was saying, I'm sure that the cost to implement it is not cheap. The cost to certify it is probably not cheap. But in the grand scheme of things, But
way cheaper than trying to do it all yourself.
Also true. Ford also has announced, or said, I shouldn't say announced, has said, I think it was today that this happened. There was an interview with Joanna Stern, and Ford CEO Jim Farley said, quote, 70% of our Ford customers in the U.S. are Apple customers. Why would I go to an Apple customer and say, good luck? And this was obviously with regard to GM saying exactly that. Farley continued, In terms of content, we kind of lost that battle 10 years ago. So, get real with it, because you're not going to make a ton of money on content inside the vehicle. It's going to be safety, security, partial autonomy, and productivity in our eyes. So that relationship for content is between you, and he was talking to Joanna Stern of the Wall Street Journal, between you, the Wall Street Journal, and the customer. I don't want to get in the middle of that. But Tesla and other companies, Rivian, believe differently. They want to have complete control over the interior experience. Now, this is me talking. I get that. But again, I just don't think that even a software company masquerading as a car company like Tesla, like Rivian, and admittedly, I have not spent an absurd amount of time with either of those infotainment systems, but I don't know. As a devout CarPlay person, I would be hard-pressed to imagine a way in which I would prefer Tesla or Rivian's setup. But I don't know, Marco, tell me I'm wrong.
I tried the Tesla, in-car stuff for years, and it's fine. It's totally fine. It is not, however, great. It is better than anything else I had had before that, but it's not great. The reality is, people want CarPlay. They want Android Auto. They love their phones. That's it. So often, we've learned this lesson over and over again. Don't bet against the smartphone. People love their phones. And it's not because we're sheep or being fooled or addicted. It's because they're really good. And CarPlay, while it is not perfect, while I don't love everything about CarPlay, it is way better than everything I've tried from anybody else.
Exactly.
It's way better than the stuff in the car. Here's the thing. Even if CarPlay wasn't very good, because look, it's not amazing, it is still your phone. You're updating the hardware of that every few years. The software is updated every year. It has all of your stuff on it. So the address book has all your places that you go. The voice control has up-to-date location information. If you want to use, different navigation apps for whatever reason, you can do that. They're all built in. Compare that to a car UI. A car UI is, at best, okay when it's first developed. In most cars, it is never updated, or in the case of Tesla, it's updated sometimes that makes it worse. So, but most cars, it's never updated at all. The hardware it's running on is never updated for the life of the car. And so, after, 5-6 years, you're running an old computer in there. And, if you have more modern expectations of what things should do, well, too bad. It does what it does. It does what it did when you bought it, and that's it. Or maybe, in the case of Tesla, where you are getting regular software updates, you're still running on the same hardware, so it's going to have limitations after a while. Your phone is constantly getting better. And so, again, and going back to the car, you're in your car, you want to, suppose you want to, get some real-time traffic information. Well, your car might have an internet connection that has that. It might not. It might have an internet connection for a little while, and then maybe a few years into owning it, maybe it doesn't have it anymore for whatever reason. Maybe your Tesla free trial expired for their data service, and you don't want to pay X dollars a month for your car to have cellular. Or maybe the cellular provider or the cellular technology your car uses, like maybe your car uses a 3G cellular modem, and then the 3G towers get shut down as we go to 4G and 5G, then that's broken.
Yep, that would be my Volkswagen. My Volkswagen went through exactly that.
All of these problems are avoided when it's your phone projecting a video stream to a screen in your car that can be as dumb as possible. CarPlay, again, while it is not amazing, it is always going to be better than what the car makers make. The car makers, they don't want that to be the case because, number one, they want control. And then I think, number two, they see revenue potential when they can do it themselves. They don't want for their car to be just showing someone else's screen and having Apple make all the money from the App Store and get all the cool data and have the car maker have no money and no data stream that they can monetize in other creepy ways. Note, though, that the reason why the car maker wants to do this themselves and not have CarPlay, those are reasons that benefit them more than their customers. And sometimes only them, and not even their customers at all. It's very clear what customers want is CarPlay. Manufacturers, the ones that don't offer that, it's going to hurt them because most people offer that. Most manufacturers offer it. So now people have been accustomed to it. Many people in the car market have, CarPlay's been out long enough and has been common for long enough that many people have owned or used a car with CarPlay by now. And as people, if GM goes through with their plan to pull it from future EVs, there's going to be a lot of people who are shopping for those future EVs and who see, oh, it doesn't have CarPlay? What the heck? and they're going to bail out of that purchase and buy something else. And so I think the cat's out of the bag here. I don't even like cats, but the cat's out of the bag here. We've been spoiled by CarPlay now, and we want it. Tesla is going to, they're going to do what they're going to do. Who knows what they're doing over there? Rivian, I think, will add it. It doesn't seem like it's a top priority for them, but I bet they will add it. And GM, I bet they're going to change their mind on this once they see the impact it'll have on their sales.
We shall see. And then finally, for follow-up, Michael Hanneman wrote in, speaking of classic macOS and holding the mouse down on a menu to freeze all other activity, John might remember the game Fool's Errand. Do you remember this, John?
I certainly do.
In it, there was one puzzle that you could only solve by exploiting this behavior, because otherwise the target moved too fast for you to click it. This was intentional. Do you want to explain this? Or I've read about it, but I've never experienced it. So do you remember this?
It's just what it said. Like, so if you use the Mac, even if you aren't technical, you did have to notice after a certain point, everything else stops when I hold down especially if you have like a game or something and you went to the menus, right? And so the Fool's Errand is the type of game. I forget what the other one was. There was the sequel to whatever. A million people will write to tell me. But there's a bunch of games that were like this. They were kind of like puzzle games. And they did a lot of sort of fourth wall breaking, and that they understood they were being played on a computer. So like the menus of the game were part of the game solving type thing. They were very clever. 3 and 3 was, I think, from the same people. Amazingly good puzzle game. And so, yeah, this one was like, you'd get that itch. You'd like, this is impossible. I can't do it. I can't click it too fast, especially because people weren't really good with the mouse back then. You probably could maybe get to it. I couldn't do it. But anyway, you're like, well, in my experience using this computer, if I want everything to stop on the screen, I just pull down a menu. I wonder if that will work. And the answer was yes, it would. And that was the way that they intended you to solve the problem. I'll put a link in the show notes and you can read about it. You could probably actually find this on one of those like, Mac Software Garden things and run it. In fact, if you just go to like infinitemac.org, I believe, there's like the launcher for system7.app, system6.app. They probably have this game installed in their games folder somewhere if you dig for it.
That is pretty cool. Then Michael continues, almost as amazing as the PS1 game where you couldn't beat the boss unless you switched the controller cable to the other port so that it could no longer read your mind/memory card. All right, this really ticked me off because I had a PlayStation 1 and I freaking loved Metal Gear Solid and I have no recollection of this.
So I don't know if this is a confused recollection. I also did not play this game on the PS1, but I remember reading about the feature. And the feature I remember reading about it, I believe it was in Metal Gear Solid. And it's when you're battling a character called Psycho Mantis, and he would freak you out by telling you, the player, things that he guessed about you. And what the game was doing was reading the memory card to see what other games you have played. And so Psycho Mantis would be like, "Oh, it looks like you like Castlevania." And you're like, "How do they know? He know that?" I don't think Castlevania is a good example, but anyway. And then, kids eventually figured out, oh, the only way he could know these things about me is because he's reading the memory card. I don't remember the fact that you had to switch the controller cable to another port so he couldn't read your memory card or whatever. But again, I didn't experience these firsthand. But this is another example of fourth wall breaking in a game. The other one that I did play through all of that was fun was Eternal Darkness on N64 or GameCube. Oh, I'm getting old if I can't remember this. It's got to be GameCube, right? Have either one of you ever heard of Eternal Darkness?
I've heard of it.
I've heard of Perfect Dark. That's a very different thing.
Oh, no, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. That's the GoldenEye that wasn't GoldenEye.
Yeah.
Right?
Eternal Darkness, it was a sort of, I don't know, like puzzle type, kind of like Resident Evil-y kind of thing. But it also did some fourth wall breaking because the character in the game, would take like psychic damage from these creatures, kind of, Lovecraftian horror type things. And they would make you make your game character start to lose their mind a little bit. And they would do fourth wall breaking by making it look like your save file had become corrupted, or like stuff that would make you flip out as a game player. The game would trick you into thinking it's malfunctioning or there's a bug or something was erased or whatever. And it was very effective. I mean, at least the first time, or especially if you hadn't read a game magazine, because it was plausible to think that really was happening, and you have the incredible anguish of losing all your progress because your save file was corrupted. I don't remember if that's an exact one, but if you go look up Eternal Darkness, if you want to be spoiled on the whole game and see all the things that it did to you during the game, it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it sounds traumatic.
You also your character gets squished by a giant lobster claw at one point. That's my most vivid memory of Eternal Darkness.
We are brought to you this week by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything. Your products, your content, even your time. Everything is possible with Squarespace. They make it easy for you to not only make a great website, but also to monetize whatever your business might be. So for instance, you can do member areas with Squarespace. You can monetize your content and expertise in a way that fits your brand, unlock a new revenue stream for your business, and free up time in your schedule by selling access to things like gated content, videos, online courses, newsletters, that kind of thing. You also can do lots of other businesses with Squarespace. You can have digital or physical goods being sold in a regular storefront. You can even, if you're somebody like a personal trainer or you give some kind of coaching or something, you can do that. You can sell time slots on Squarespace too. There's so much power there for businesses. You can use analytics and insights to grow your business, learn where your visits and your sales are coming from, analyze your marketing channels. All built in to Squarespace. It is super easy to use too. They have great support if you need it, but you probably honestly won't because it's all just, visual, live previewing what you see is what you get kind of thing. It's, you don't have to deal with code or servers or upgrades or patches or anything like that. It is just a great platform to make websites. You can see for yourself by building one in trial mode. You can fully build the entire site. There's no big watermark or anything. Just build your entire site at Squarespace to try it out, see for yourself at squarespace.com/ATP. Do that free trial. I'm positive you will be as happy with it as I've been when I've used it. So squarespace.com/ATP to start that trial. When you're ready to launch, use offer code ATP at purchase to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So once again, squarespace.com/ATP, offer code ATP for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring our show.
We have received, most of us, our first rapid security response from Apple. I don't know if anyone has declared what specifically they were trying to fix. Maybe they did and I missed it. But
too rapid. No time.
Yeah, exactly. Screw it. We'll do it live. So Apple has decided there's some sort of bug that was bad enough to justify using this rapid security response framework that they've been working on for a while. This has been used in betas for off and on for a while, perhaps just for the purposes of testing. I don't know if they were actually fixing anything or not, but this is the first time that real honest to goodness iOS users got it. I did it today and it was stunningly fast. John, how could that be so quick?
Yeah, so first of all, in the show notes, we'll have a Tidbits article by Adam Engst where he goes into lots of detail about this. If you have applied this, which Casey has and I have as well on one of my Macs, no, actually on both of my Macs, I think, you'll notice that the version number of your operating system, instead of just having 3 numbers with dots between them, now has a letter at the end. So the releases were for iOS, it's 16.4.1a. And for macOS, it's 13.3.1a. And, that's, as the name says, this is supposed to be a feature of iOS 16 and macOS Ventura and iPadOS 16 as well, to give updates faster for, crucial situations or for, urgent situations. And the update did run really fast for me on the Mac. And same thing on the phone. It ran so fast it made me wonder if it had actually applied it.
Yeah. Right.
And, so Adam talks about in the article the goal of rapid response and his estimation. I don't know if this is straight from Apple, but either way, they're trying to make the installation time shorter because no one likes their phone or their Mac to be sitting there for 20 minutes doing an update. It's just too time consuming. They want the download size to be smaller. I don't know if you've noticed with all our gigabit fiber connections, we maybe don't notice how big downloads are all the time. But a lot of these updates, even if it's just a point update, 13.3 to 13.3.1, that update can be surprisingly big. And if you don't have a fast connection or if you're stuck on cellular or something on your phone, it can take a long time to download or it can burn through a lot of your data. So that's not great. And then, people are a little bit hesitant to install updates because they're afraid it's going to break something. And you might be thinking, well, how does this help with that? An update's an update. I would be just as hesitant, right? Well, I'll get to that in a second. So to deal with the download size and installation time, they're using a technology that was introduced, I think, in Ventura called cryptexes. This has been in our show notes for many months, probably since Ventura came out. It stands for cryptographically sealed extension. I know we've talked about this before, but Ventura and I think a couple of operating systems before that use something called a sealed system volume, it used to be that the operating system was on the same disk that as your user data, and it was just a disk, and use Unix permissions to protect the files. Then eventually the operating system was put into like a read-only partition. So it was mounted read-only, and the operating system was there, and then your user data would be elsewhere. In its current state, what Macs boot from, and I don't even know if this is what the deal is on iOS. I'm not even address it, but anyway, on the Mac, what Macs boot from is something called a sealed system volume, which is a read-only snapshot. So it's not even like you're not booting from like a read-only mounted disk. It is a read-only snapshot of a disk. You're booting from a snapshot. And that it's cryptographically sealed, and that every single byte of data on there has a cascading series of checksums that lead to like a master checksum. And in theory, if any one bit of data anywhere on the entire sealed system volume changes, the checksum will be invalid and the Mac won't boot from it. So it's kind of a way to ensure that the operating system is known good and it's the same for everybody. There's no variance. You can't get in there and muck around with it. If you do go in there and like mess with stuff, it will invalidate the signature and you won't be able to boot from it anymore. And that's why in this day and age, for the most part, with some caveats, the old sort of cure of weird problems of like, let's just reinstall the OS shouldn't do anything, because the thing that you're booting from is supposedly cryptographically proven to be exactly intact and exactly what is expected. There is other stuff elsewhere that's not part of the sealed system volume, however. In particular, I think when they first shipped this, they had a bunch of other parts where they'd put things like Safari and shared caches and stuff like that. And that's because updating anything in the sealed system volume is a major pain in the butt. Even if you're only updating a little bit of it, I think the problem is that what it has to do, first of all, it has to reboot, and it has to boot from something else so it can get the volume that has the sealed system volume snapshot on it and mount it read-write, and then modify it, and then recalculate and reapply all the checksums and seal it back up, and then make a new snapshot, and then reboot again, and then reboot from the new snapshot. And that is time consuming. Like, no matter how small change you make, just the overhead of doing that takes a surprising amount of time, even if you change like one file. So that's not great. So to try to help with that, they have a system called cryptexes, which are kind of like little tiny sealed volumes. They're basically like little images that are cryptographically sealed. Again, every single byte on them has checksums in every directory all the way up to the top level one. So you're sure that it contains what you think it contains. And in those cryptexes, they make them smaller. So one of them has like Safari inside it or whatever, so you can update Safari more quickly. What the system does during boot is it boots from the read-only snapshot of the sealed system volume, and then it takes those cryptexes and sort of loads them and overlays them in kind of NFS overlay parlance. I don't know if that helps anybody, but like it overlays them, it grafts them onto the sealed system volume. So it's a series of smaller cryptographically sealed things that are grafted onto it, making one complete system. And it's faster to update the cryptexes because they're smaller. They have less stuff in them, and resealing them and making sure all the checksums are right takes less time than doing it on the big one. So rapid security response things, they're cryptexes, and they're small-ish. And since they're cryptexes, what that means is if you were to look at like where all this stuff is, you'd see the sealed system volume, you see like essentially, I don't know if it's like a disk image or whatever, you'd see the thing that holds Safari, you'd see the thing that holds like shared caches and stuff like that, and you'd see a one for the rapid security response, the one we just had. And what that means is that it's really easy to remove these things. And you can actually remove this. I don't quite know what it is. You can remove a rapid security response thing. So if you, on your Mac, if you go to General About and then click on the magic little eye in a circle, which everybody knows in system settings in the Mac, you have to click on because everything is behind there, you will see that the last rapid security response that's in there, and there's a button that says remove and restart. And that will basically just delete the cryptex, because it doesn't, unlike an update to your operating system where it actually modifies your operating system, like it overwrites the old versions of the files, the cryptexes are separate and they get grafted on top of your operating system. So if you just delete the cryptex, when it's booting and doing that process where it grafts them on, it won't find that one and so it won't graft it on. And so that's how that update will be removed. I guess they do this just in case they screw up real bad, because the whole idea of rapid response is like, oh, there's a security problem. We need to get this thing updated out as fast as possible. Go, 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 right? And they go real fast, and they put it out in 24 hours. Oh, they screwed up somehow. There's a bug or whatever. So they don't hose everyone's systems. These things are removable. I'm not sure how that would manifest. If you've really hosed your thing, maybe you can't even boot to the point where you can remove it. Maybe you're able to remove it from recovery. I'm not entirely sure. But this is how it works on iOS as well. If you go on iOS and go to Settings, General, About, and into the version, you can remove the the rapid security response that you just installed. In terms of the sizes, you can look in the Tidbits article. They vary depending on the OS, but like one of them was as small as like 53 megabytes for an iMac that were installed in a minute and a half. That is unheard of in the modern era of doing Mac updates where every single update is like 800 megabytes and takes 20 minutes to install. So hopefully everybody went through this and applied the update. You do have to reboot for this one. In theory, they could distribute a cryptex that didn't require a reboot, I suppose, if it's not like urgent that you reboot immediately. And I don't know, maybe they could graft it onto the running system volume or something. Not entirely sure. But the reboot, like on my phone, the reboot was so fast, again, I thought it might not have installed. The Mac reboot, I could tell it was installing something, but it didn't sit there for an hour with like a little white progress bar and a black screen. So I give the system a cautious thumbs up. Still kind of confused about the removal thing, but it's a feature that is made possible by the technology that they use. Kind of like all of the APFS features that enable really easy, user-facing features like snapshots. That's because of the underlying technology. And so cryptexes, this weird thing where they have these cryptographically sealed little turds that graft onto the other thing, allow stuff like easy removal of OS updates. And I think that's a good thing.
All right. Well, I feel better for having known that. Do you want to do some Ask ATP?
Let's do it.
Ben would like to know, before the iPhone 14 Plus came out, this is the large size but not Pro version of the iPhone 14, there was a lot of optimism about consumers wanting larger screens without upgrading to a more expensive Pro model. So far, that hasn't panned out. Do you think that a 15-inch MacBook Air will be different or the same story? I think that a 15-inch MacBook Air, assuming it's not prohibitively expensive, assuming the expense is commensurate with the larger screen, I think it'll sell really, really, really well, because I think a lot of people don't necessarily fancy themselves professionals by the Apple definition. They don't need an SD card slot. Maybe they need an HDMI port. I don't know. But I think a lot of people would want just the same MacBook Air, but bigger. So I would assume it would sell. But I mean, obviously all of us said that about the 14 Plus, so who knows? Marco, what do you think about that?
So coincidentally, 100% coincidentally, I told you that I had to get more test devices for my test device fleet. And I said I had purchased a really cheap iPhone SE, mostly for Adam's watch pairing. I had also purchased an iPad mini. And the third and final device that was part of that purchase was an iPhone 14 Plus.
Of course. Of course.
So no one bought them, but I did. I found a good, just like the other ones, I found a good deal on Amazon for a refurb. I am now the proud owner of a 14 Plus. I gotta say, it's surprisingly not bad. Like, first of all, it is surprisingly lightweight for its size. It weighs roughly as much as my non-Plus 14 Pro, regular size. It gives me hope for the future, Pro phones that are going to switch materials. Maybe they'll be lighter. That would be nice. Anyway, so yeah, it feels good in the hand. But it's a totally fine device. But I haven't really used it as my phone because it's been my test device, and it will continue to be my test device over the summer. So anyway, moving on to the actual question about the 15-inch MacBook Air, whether that will be kind of land with kind of as a dud or actually be popular and successful. And frankly, I think it's going to be a really big hit. So when you look at the Mac lineup, there is this massive price gap between the MacBook Air, which almost everyone buys, and anything with a bigger screen than 13 inches. And meanwhile, if you look at the world of PC laptops, look at what people are actually using, especially for work, but just look around. What do people buy for PC laptops? Yes, 13-inch laptops are very common, but so are 15-inch roughly class laptops. Like, those are also very common. There's a lot of people who, when push comes to shove, if they want a Mac and they want, a big screen, some of them do jump all the way up to the very pretty premium price of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, but many of them don't. Many of them either settle for a 13-inch MacBook Air and just say, well, I would like this to be bigger, but this is what I can afford or justify, and therefore that's it. Or they go and buy a cheap 15-inch PC because it's a lot cheaper. The 13-inch MacBook Air, now that we have the Apple Silicon era, it is in many ways like one of the best computers Apple has ever sold. It might be the best all-arounder for most people that they've ever sold when you factor in price and value. But even if you don't, like the size and weight of it and battery life are just so good. Like it's such a great computer. If they can broaden the appeal of that form factor without increasing the specs of everything so high that they need to charge like $2,500 for it, that's going to get a lot of people in the door. Now, also look at when businesses buy computers. This, I think, people are looking at this as like, why would consumers buy this with the M2 chip when the M3 is around the corner? It is not about that at all. You know who's going to buy these? Businesses, tons and tons of them. They are going to buy these by the carton, like whatever unit Apple sells them in. Businesses are going to buy these like crazy because businesses want to give all their employees a laptop. Apple's been making pretty good strides in that area in a lot of industries, and they usually have to just buy the MacBook Airs. But it turns out people do like bigger screens sometimes. And businesses usually, especially businesses, really have a hard time justifying MacBook Pro prices for a lot of employees. Obviously, if your work involves heavy computer usage in ways that the pros actually are meaningfully better, that's a different story. Most corporate laptops bought for most employees don't need that kind of power. Most of them just need to be able to browse the internet in a relatively safe and nice way with decent battery life and relatively low cost and as big a screen as you're willing to put on it. That's what most people want. All that set aside, by comparison, if you look at the iPhone 14 Plus market, the 14 Plus, I know from having just bought one and having waited a long time for like a decent deal to actually pop up, the 14 Plus is expensive. It is barely cheaper than the Pro phones. The theory I've heard from enthusiasts about the 14 Plus is that it's not so much about this year as in future years, they've never brought a Plus or Max sized phone down to like the last year's phone price slot. They always just discontinue them and replace them with the new one. This is presumably going to be the first one, in all likelihood, that they will drop by $100 or $200 over the next year and make that the cheaper phone. So the full story of the 14 Plus has yet to be told, but also if you compare it to what it's like the cheaper version of, it's not that big of a price difference. Whereas if you look at the 15-inch MacBook Air, if we don't know where this is going to land price-wise, but I would guess somewhere around like $1,600, something in that ballpark probably, and that's going to be substantially cheaper than a 16-inch MacBook Pro. And also, for most people's needs, will be just as good, unless you really need those like big heavy-duty stuff. So I think they're going to sell a ton of these things. And good for them, because the MacBook Air is awesome. And to make a bigger one to enjoy that same... Even if it, people are like, oh, you should put the M2 Pro in it. No, they're not going to. They don't need to. They can just make the exact same computer as the 13-inch MacBook Air, but bigger. Exactly the same in every other way. And it will sell like crazy because it's a great computer already. No one cares if it has the M2 or the M3 in it. They'll sell a ton of them no matter what, and it'll be awesome.
Torstein writes, is HDR and Dolby Vision worth the trouble? HDR can have overly bright scenes, white subtitles ruin dark scenes, and blinds you in a dark room. ABL triggers several times during one movie. Colors can look oversaturated, and the format war between HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and DV fragments content. Not to mention the different DV profiles, which is a hot mess. I prefer SDR 10-bit as it's more pleasant to watch in a dark room and looks more accurate color-wise. What are your thoughts? I don't care. John, what do you think?
Oh, but you will care eventually,
I'm sure.
if you don't already. So here's the thing with the Dolby Vision, HDR, and all that stuff. If you believe in the march of progress that video is traveling down, the idea that the picture looks more and more realistic over time, it's inevitable that the next step in realism of your television set is related to brightness. Because if you think of your television as like a frame, like an actual hole in your wall, and then through that hole is whatever you're seeing on television, it doesn't look like that now. If you looked out your window and you saw a boat on the ocean or a sunset or A space battle is harder to imagine because that's kind of very fictional. But anything real world, a family sitting on a blanket on the beach. If it was not a television set, but was just a hole in your wall, and through that magical hole, like a portal in the game Portal, you could see a family on the beach, and you were in a dark room, you would be totally blinded because it's the bright sun of the beach and you're in a dark room. That's not a fun experience, but that is quote unquote realistic. So we are traveling down that road to realism. And the things that contribute to that are obviously, 3D, parallax, blah, 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 which we're not doing. It would be very difficult to do. Resolution, which we've been doing a little bit, and we're kind of getting to the point now at normal viewing distances on a 4K TV, the pixels are probably too small for you to see. And dynamic range. What's the darkest? What's the brightest? Color reproduction, right? If it was actually just a hole in the magical portal that showed you a beach, you don't have to worry about those things. The beach is the beach. It's got the colors that it's got. Like it's got the brightness that it's got. But there are lots of real world scenarios where looking at the thing that is being depicted, whether it be a sunset or a beach or, even just an interior of a store with fluorescent lighting, from the perspective of sitting in a dark room would be too much for you to handle. So part of the job of the creator of media with this new technologies like HDR is to figure out how to present what they're presenting. They could choose to have a really dark scene and the next scene be on a beach with maximum HDR brightness. They could do that for effect to make the audience squint and go, because maybe that's what needs to happen at that point in the show. You're cutting to someone who's in the desert getting baked and you want the audience to squint. But if you don't want the audience to squint, don't take them from a long dark scene into full HDR brightness because they're going to squint. And that's what I think creators of media are learning now is how do I use HDR to further the story I'm trying to tell? How bright do I want things to be? Which things do I want to be bright? What kind of effect do they have? Moderated by, of course, I know what it looks like here on my $30,000 mastering monitor in this, video suite, but what is it going to look like in real people's houses on their crappy TVs that aren't calibrated, right? So it's a difficult problem, but lots of people who experience HDR and find it off-putting, some of that could be the people who made that didn't give enough thought to how this was going to feel to watch. Some of it could be people are making media to try to make you feel like, oh, that's way too bright, or oh, that's way too dark, and you just don't like it. And what you're saying there is, I don't like the artistic choice you made. You can not like the artistic choice someone made in terms of you think the story is dumb, the acting is bad, or also this, the color grading is weird, or they did the HDR in a way that I didn't like. That's a thing. I am a believer in giving creators these tools because when used well, it makes for a more impactful, more realistic looking picture. And I think that is valuable. That's why we all oohed and awed over HD TV when it came out. That's why we like 4K. And yes, that's why we like HDR because it gets closer to being realistic. But in all media, you don't have to make it look like it would look if it was a magical portal. You can choose to make it look how you want it to look to further your story. And things being awe-inspiring and realistic looking or more like reality is sometimes what you want to happen. And so that's why I think these tools are essential. And that's why I think we're going to get more of this. And as we get more of it, now as the tools become more powerful, creators will have to be careful. Up to, I don't think we'll ever get to this point because I think they'll probably pull back, but up to the point where, hey, if you go outside on a sunny day and you look up at the sun, you'll burn your eyeballs out. Hopefully we won't ever have a television that can put out the light output of the literal sun, because then if a creator made a bad choice and put the full sun in the middle of the picture, you'd look at it and it would burn your eyeballs out and little kids would go blind because they don't know to look away, right? So let's not do that, okay? But somewhere between where we are now and that, I think we have to continue traveling that road because there are still situations, for example, when you have an HDR-capable television in a very bright, sunny room and the sun is shining directly on the screen and you can't see the picture because it's washed out because the real sun is more powerful than your television set. We've got a ways to go, but I feel the pain of the person who wrote in about this, but I think you kind of can't stand in the way of the march of progress, but that march is filled with people making bad mistakes.
As always. Nick from Toronto writes, do you guys have any thoughts or opinions on these motorized standing desks? I'm moving and can't bring my current desk with me, so I'm exploring options. Heck, I'd even like to hear what you guys think about your regular desks. I had a somewhat infamous glass desk. It's actually in pieces behind me because I recently upgraded to a standing desk. I had thought over spring break that we were going to be going past the closest IKEA to us. One of the few problems with living in Richmond. Yes, you heard me, you two. One of the few problems of living in Richmond is that the nearest IKEA to me is 90 minutes away on a good day, which sucks. But I thought we were going to be driving by it, and so I'd asked for opinions on Mastodon a while back about, hey, I forget which model it was, but is the such and such IKEA model of standing desk any good? And I really didn't want to hear anyone talk about other options because that's not what I was asking. However, everyone said that the fully standing desks are excellent. And that didn't really matter to me because I was pretty much decided I was getting an IKEA one. But then somebody said, oh, and by the way, Fully at the time, I don't think this is true anymore, was having a steep discount because, as it turns out, Herman Miller has bought Fully. And so now Fully is just a line of Herman Miller stuff.
But weren't they a sponsor a long time ago?
Fully might have been, actually. Yeah, shoot, I'm glad you called that out.
I think they were.
I think you're right. But it was forever ago, if memory serves. But anyways.
Yeah, it was not recent.
Yeah, so all of this had nothing to do with the fact that they previously sponsored, but thank you, Marco, for pointing that out. But anyway, so everyone and their mother said buy a Fully, and then somebody said, oh, and by the way, it's cheap right now, and that's all I needed to hear, baby. So I ordered myself a 60-inch by 27-inch, I don't care what that is in metric, but a relatively large stone-colored sit-stand desk, and I freaking love it. I don't think that you necessarily need to buy this exact desk, although I have put a link to it in the show notes. But if you can find a sit-stand desk that doesn't wobble a whole ton, I am in full support. Since I got this maybe a month ago, I have been sitting and standing on and off all day long, and I love it. I cannot stress enough how much I enjoy having a sit-stand desk. An alternative to this, by the way, shoot. What is it? VeriDesk? Did you see these a lot when you were at work, John? Do you know what I'm talking about?
All sit-stand desks tend to look the same to me, so I don't...
No. This is something else. This is Vari.com, VARI.com, and they do these things, VeriDesk desktop converters. And what it is it's an impossibly heavy thing that you stick your monitors and your keyboard on, and then that thing sits on your desktop and lifts up. And if you can't get a sit-stand desk, it's actually a pretty good second choice option. And I had that when I was working most recently at a real job. But yeah, I really like my Fully. But before I move on and give you guys a chance to talk, I love this desk, and I got the one that, you can program, which I think Marco years and years ago had said, you got to get one that you can set, your particular heights that you like. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, that matters a lot.
It makes a big difference. But with the desk, I bought Fully's JAX, JAX dual monitor arm. Holy crap, this is the best monitor arm I've ever gotten, because my studio display is a VGA mount. My 5K Ultra Meh, I took off the stand, so it's now effectively did I say VGA mount? I'm sorry, a Visa mount, or Vesa, or however you pronounce it. Anyways, so both of these things are on the Fully JAX dual monitor arm. This is the best monitor arm I have ever used. I've never had any of the fancy schmancy XDR ones, so I can't speak to those. But just for regular old Visa mount stuff, this arm is so freaking good. I love my sit-stand desk, and I love the freaking monitor arm even more. It is so good. So definitely check that out. And it's not a bespoke thing that would only work with a Fully desk. You might want to check this out even if you have a different style desk, because it is that damn good. And I think they have a single monitor version as well, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, full support of a sit-stand desk. And again, prior sponsor, Fully, is my pick from my experience of, let me check my notes, one standing desk. But I do really like it nonetheless. Now, Marco, I think you probably have the most experience with this, even more so than me. Mine is just recency bias. So thoughts, corrections, where did I go wrong?
I think you pretty much got it. So yeah, number one, I love standing desk. The electrically raising and lowering kind is great if you can do it. I have used them on and off for a long time now, over a decade. The good thing about it is that I've used, I think, 3 in that time. 2, no, just 2, I guess. But I've seen more, here and there, and heard other people's stories. And it universally seems to be they're all pretty good. If you just find a standing desk that you like the look and dimensions and price and features of, you're probably good. Like it's not something that you have to really, get too picky about. The first one I had when I was at Tumblr, that was we had visited the Fog Creek offices. And
oh, I bet that was nice.
It was really nice, and they had just gotten these amazing desks. And I asked Joel Spolsky, like, "Hey, can you tell me the name of these?" And it was back then. It was the kind of thing like, he's awesome. I love Joel, and we had to like go through some kind of like commercial furniture dealer to get them. Like it wasn't something you could just like order and have it shipped normally like from a website. It's like you have to like find the dealer and all this stuff because it was like commercial only use. That was probably 2008 or something. Like that was a long time ago. Things are very different now. Now everybody can get them. You can get them delivered. IKEA sells them. Like there's as you said, like there's so many options. That one that we got back then, we did get them. And then when I left Tumblr, I asked if I could take my desk with me. And David said sure. So I remember I drove my Honda Accord into Manhattan one weekend and unloaded this desk from my office building from downtown Manhattan, or midtown Manhattan rather.
That must have been fun.
Yeah, fitting it into a Honda Accord required some degree of disassembly, but it worked anyway. And I still have that desk. That's I have that in one place, and in the other place I got one for the beach from this company Uplift. They're a pretty popular standing desk maker. I am super happy with it as well. It's super heavy duty. They have a bunch of different options. I have the Uplift V2 like regular standing desk. I don't have the one with the big crossbar. I don't think. Hold on. Yeah. I don't have the one with the big crossbar. I had to look. It's super sturdy. Like it doesn't wiggle much. It's rock solid, and they have a lot of different like wood options for the top, which was important to me. Like I wanted to get like nice. Decent wood and have it match the room and everything. So yeah, Uplift I can recommend. But really, as Casey mentioned earlier, the one feature you want in a standing desk is position memory. Chances are, if you use a standing desk, you're not gonna be standing all the time or sitting all the time, and you're probably gonna have like one set height that you like to sit at and a different set height that you like to stand at. And if you don't have memory on the control panel, you have to just, raise and lower it each time and kind of guess where you want it to be. And that's infuriating because it's always like a little bit off and you're not quite, is this what, maybe raise it up a little bit. And then, is this right? Nah, it's like.
Just put a piece of tape on the wall, save some money.
They don't, yeah. And this is one thing, like if you get like any decent standing desk, usually it comes with memory now, except for the very cheapest models. Even the ones that have an option not to have memory, the option to add the memory is usually like $100 or less. Add it. Trust me. Take that option. You want that option. It radically changes how nice it is to use in practice. But yeah, otherwise, it's a great thing to use. I used to have some back issues that I had to stand for a while. That's why at Tumblr I initially like faked it with like some IKEA bookshelves held up by Coke cans on my desk. It was a whole thing. But it's a nice thing for the way you work to be as comfortable as possible, and whatever your body needs, listen to it. And if you need to stand for a while, stand for a while. And if you get something that's electrically raising and lowering and has memories, it makes it very easy to switch back and forth depending on what you need at that moment, or what's more comfortable for you, or what's more healthy, or whatever. So strongly recommended. I'm a big fan.
John, I'm a little surprised that you didn't advocate dangling a tennis ball off the ceiling like garage style to figure out what the standing height would be.
Tape on the wall is less intrusive. You don't need the tennis balls because you can't put it against the wall. You got to have it hit the windshield, so it's got to be in the middle. But yeah, just two pieces of tape on the wall will do it.
All right, so what is your desk situation? Did you ever have at any of your jobs a standing desk? I presume not.
I had the option for one, but I was never really into it. A lot of other people who I work with did have them, and eventually they were basically standard issue to everybody. I think I might have had one at a certain point, but I never moved it. So is it really a standing desk if I never actually raise it? Although even just as a regular desk, it's nice to be able to pick the height that you want the sitting desk to be at, even if you don't use it as a standing desk. Because most desks, you can pick from like one or two possible heights, and that's it. And you can adjust with your chair height, but then if you have short legs, then your feet are dangling, then you need a footrest, and it's just this whole thing where being able to adjust the height of the desk is nice. But no, I never really used one in a standing position at work. At home, I have a plain old, boring, non-standing desk that's very, very old. But when my wife, we made her a little office down in the basement for her to do more working from home during the beginning of the pandemic. I believe what she got, I was trying to look this up while you guys were talking, pretty sure it is the Uplift desk. I mean, a lot of standing desks look similar, but I'm pretty sure it's Uplift. It's a very popular brand. I looked at the pictures and I'm like, yeah, that's her desk. I'm pretty darn sure. So she uses that down there. I'm not sure if she sit stands with it or not, but again, I think she appreciates the fact that because she's a shorter person that she can adjust the sitting position to be what she likes. And it is standable. And I think we did get it with memory. I don't remember. One thing I will say about sit stand desks is they're heavier than you think they are.
Yes.
Yep.
So
very heavy.
Good ones are anyway.
This one came disassembled and I had to bring it down to the basement to assemble it. And I'm bringing the boxes down. I'm like, what is in these things? The leg parts of them are very heavy. And this gets to what I think is one of the most important features of a sit stand desk, unrelated to the standing. Because of the way they're designed, especially like the Uplift desk or whatever, there's just two extremely heavy legs and with little feet on them. But there's nothing else. Like there's no sort of intrusion into the area where your legs would be. There's no back thing. There's no legs poking in. There's no bar going across. It is just complete open space because the metal is so heavyweight that they don't need anything. So you can get a huge standing desk, very deep, very wide. It's just going to have the two legs with no bars. And that always annoyed me when I was shopping for computer desks in the really old days when sit-stand desks weren't really a thing. You'd find a lot of them that did stuff to where your legs are, they have that supports or braces or struts or stuff like that. These things usually do have some sort of overpriced cable management thing that they'll sell you to go under the desk. Those are okay. You could do your own cable management for a lot less money, but sometimes it's convenient to have them, but they're a little bit janky. But anyway, I do appreciate how incredibly solidly constructed these things are. Like, they seem like way overkill. It seems like you could have a dance party on the top of the desk and it would be fine. It's just so heavy, right? And the motors are nice and smooth and quiet. So, I also endorse the Uplift desk, but personally, I haven't used them. I don't know. I think maybe I could get used to it if I had to, but it's just something about sitting feels right to me when I'm using a computer. So that's what I'm doing. And my desk is really old, but it does, I just want a really big, flat surface for my desk. I can imagine replacing it. And if I did replace it, I would get a sit-stand desk. Because at this point, like, if you're buying an expensive desk anyway, and you're looking for a high-quality, expensive desk, even if you don't care about standing at all, the easiest way to find it is to buy a sit-stand. Because they'll be solidly constructed, because they have to be for all the motors and everything. And you can get them in all sorts of shapes and sizes, all sorts of finishes, and they're very solid. Again, my experience is only with all of the whatever brand I had at work, which some of them might have been Uplift, but I know a couple others were different brands. And then the Uplift one that I bought at home, and every single standing desk I've seen in the past decade has just been a plain, good, solid desk. So, thumbs up.
Thanks to our sponsors this week, Trade Coffee, Squarespace, and Hullo Pillow. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join at atp.fm/join. We appreciate that very, very much. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
I was using Casey's app to look up the year of this movie earlier. Marco, when you were talking about the CarPlay thing, you were like, people love their phones. Mm-hmm. Do you remember saying that? So this is from the 1992 movie Singles, which actually has a podcast connection in that movie, which I assume neither one of you saw or has even heard of.
Nope.
Correct.
Okay. Anyway, in Singles, it's like a kind of a Gen X movie. It's a dumb plot where some girl has to pick between two guys who are both jerks. Anyway, one of the people is this nerdy guy, and he's like in the Pacific Northwest somewhere, probably Seattle. Yeah, that's kind of the base of the movie. Anyway, he's proposing that they should add a train to, for public transportation to some metropolitan area, and he calls it Super Train. Which you may have heard from Roderick on the line. He's like, Super Train, we're going to put in Super Train, and it's going to, here's how it's going to be so great. It's going to help make commuting much faster and reduce traffic and blah, blah, Super Train, right? And the everyone who he showed it to, like in, the people who are in power would look at it and go, I don't know. People love their cars. And that was the refrain through the whole movie. The people love their cars. No matter what he said about Super Train, it was always people love their cars. And now here you are saying people love their phones to the car makers. And the car makers are like, wait, in the 90s, people love their cars. Now you're saying they like their phones? They love their phones? They do. They do love their phones. They do love their cars, but not for computer app platform media things. For that, they love their phone. For cars, they like the whole wheels and rolling and moving from place to place. Stick to that.
Yeah.
Marco, you went on an adventure recently, it looks like.
I sure did. So
where'd you go, bud?
We decided for various kid birthday party reasons. The birthday party for my kid this spring happened at Dave & Buster's.
Oh, is this the one in Times Square or near Times Square or something else?
God, no.
Okay.
No, there's a couple on Long Island. It was one of those.
You've heard of the App Store and casino games for children? Welcome to Casinos for Children.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. So, all right. So it had been the last time I was in a Dave & Buster's.
Oh, it's been forever for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was when I lived in Pittsburgh in like 2004.
Oh, wow. That's even more forever than what I'm talking about.
And I've been occasionally to like arcadey things in the intervening time, but not much, like once or twice total. And so it's been a while. And I was surprised by a few aspects of it. So for those of you who don't know, if you're not like, Americans or whatever, Dave & Buster's is a chain of kind of arcade sports bars, I guess. Like, is that how you, like, they're these like big arcades that also have like bars and food service for adults, but it's mainly like a giant arcade. So they have, arcade games, and they also have games that give you like tickets that you can trade in for garbage toys, at ridiculous rates. Just like skating rinks and stuff like that in the past. So anyway, the kid part of it went totally great. It was, we rented a room it was a multi-child party, and it was great, and it went very well, and they were good for that. But what was interesting is we got to see like what modern arcade games are, and certain things that have changed, and certain things that haven't. So, number one, what I wanted to do first, once all the kid stuff was settled and the adults had a little bit of time to walk around and play the games while the children were doing the same thing, first thing I wanted to do was I want to play freaking Guitar Hero. I love Guitar Hero. I don't have any modern version of it on any system that, nobody makes plastic guitars anymore. So let me go play Guitar Hero. I queued up the best Guitar Hero song, which is Black Magic Woman by Santana. It was such a frustrating experience because, first of all, you don't really use coins and stuff anymore in these kind of arcades. You get like cards or, RFID thingies, and you scan them and it deducts from your credit balance or whatever. So, first you got to go buy a card, put, $25 or whatever on it. And then, you go to the games and, they express the prices in arbitrary units. So it's like this game costs 9. 9 what? How many what's are on my card? God knows. Like, so first of all, they're obfuscating the price so that you pay more. That's great. We're off to a great start.
Right.
Also, the cards come in intervals of $25, but there is almost no way to spend exactly that, because the prices are not divisible correctly. Yep. So you end up with like $3 or $2 or whatever of unused credit that you just kind of can't use on anything. So that so they get you there, of course. See also every iOS game that has in-game credits that you buy. Like this is Nintendo too. Like this is a popular scam. So okay, at least I know I'm getting scammed. So I go play Guitar Hero. I beat my little card against the thing, and it like kind of gets me, and then it just doesn't work. And that's like beep it again, and I'm pretty sure I paid twice for my one game that I got. And then I play the game, and Guitar Hero has like the 5 fret buttons that like you play the game with by pushing those buttons, and one of them just outright doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I don't suck this badly. Like I'm not I'm not missing every green note. So like certainly like those are really obvious. I can hit those, and I'm hitting all the other ones, and so the game was like, you know, partially broken. It was hard to play. It double charged me. I'm like, okay, here we are, off to a great start. But you know, I'm putting on a good face because you know it's my kid's birthday. I'm not gonna act upset or anything. But I'm like I'm already like irritated slightly. Now there are some games that I think were pretty impressive. I was surprised how few new games there were since last time I'd been in an arcade. and I think it's different now because now, like, you know, when arcades were a thing, when we were growing up, you didn't have great video games at home or in your pocket constantly. Now, everyone has great video games everywhere. Like, they're so commonplace and on such like common hardware that everybody already has. You don't need to go to an arcade to play a good video game. You are already playing good video games in other forms. What the arcade serves is like weird novelties. You know, the multiplayer, you know, 2 or 4 player link up racing games. Those are always fun. I love those. Mm-hmm. Although again, even those, it was like Mario Kart and Cruisin' USA. Or Cruisin' World, whatever the Cruisin' USA franchise is up to now. Maybe, and like a bike thing, and that was about it. So I thought that was kind of interesting. There were a couple of like, you know, gun shooting games. One thing I had a lot of fun with was there's this category of game where the screen is a whole bunch of really little bright LEDs, and they use it to show like old games. Like I played Space Invaders this way. And so you have this giant, it looks like you're playing on a scoreboard for a sports stadium.
That's a micro LED, but it's not so micro. Like when we talk about micro LED TV, that's what we're talking about. But they use that in sports stadiums, but you were playing the non-micro version.
Yeah, I was playing macro LED version of Space Invaders. Mm-hmm. It's interesting because, like, first of all, it's Dave & Buster's, because it's like, you know, a big arcade. It's very dark inside. There's like, you know, it's like almost pitch black, and it's lit only by the lights. It looks almost like an old style Vegas casino of like, you know, no windows anywhere. They don't want you to see the outside world. So it's very dark, and it's lit up pretty much only by all the games and their big displays and everything. So it looks a lot like a casino. It sounds a lot like a casino. And so anyway, these games, they ranged in quality. You know, I had a lot of fun playing Space Invaders with my kid. They had like 2 different guns. Like you'd both sit down, you'd play together like co-op Space Invaders on this giant like eye-searing, you know, sports scoreboard display. It was kind of cool. Like that was very novel. They had the carnival games where like you get the tickets if you're able to like throw all the balls and knock over all the things, or, you know, skee ball and stuff like that. But it's like you get the tickets.
I was going to say, did they have skee ball? Because the day that skee ball leaves those places, it's really the end of an era.
They did have it, but all the kids were like, this is not as good as the others because you have to score too much to get the tickets. And so here's what happens. We paid whatever it was per kid so that the birthday kids had these wristbands with RFID thingies on them. And so they were unlimited like video games, but they had a limit on how many like ticket things they could get. They quickly ran through the video game part because it was unlimited. They quickly like kind of exhausted themselves of their value there because they're all these kind of shallow arcade games, and you know they're all made to play for 90 seconds and then you move on. Right, so they burned through those fairly quickly, and then it became time for the ticket games. Now, in casino gambling, you pour money down the drain because you are motivated by the chance of maybe making some money. And it's really, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the destructive nature that has on a lot of people. I recognize that's that can be a pretty dangerous thing, a pretty harmful thing to society when it goes wrong. So, you know, I'm kind of sensitive to like, should we really be teaching children this mechanic? And this is part of the reason why I'm so down on a lot of App Store stuff, because when you look at, you know, the way the App Store gaming environment is, it is a lot of simulated gambling, or oftentimes even sometimes real gambling. And I don't love that we somehow consider that a separate thing. You know, I think if we're going to look at gambling as a society and say this should be, you know, tightly regulated and it's kind of a problem and some places don't even want it at all, I think we should apply a lot of that same scrutiny to what we, you know, have children play on their phones and iPads. And I think Apple needs to be substantially more strict than they are in that way. But it's hard for them to be that strict when they're making so much money from it. But anyway, it was interesting though when the kids switched over to the ticket games, the ones like, okay, well, you can use you put in your money or you use your credit, and then a ball falls from the top, and if it hits this thing, you win. And everything, it's like carnival games, everything is slanted against you. Like there's little tricks and gotchas and deception and like kind of cheats that they do so that like, oh, you're definitely going to miss this clown thing that you're throwing the ball at because it has all this hair sticking out the side that makes it look wider than it is. Or like you got to hit it really hard, otherwise it won't fall over and the ball will just bounce off, or like stuff like that. He played this like kind of controllable Plinko. It looks like Plinko from The Price is Right, but you drop the thing down and you're trying to get it in the center slot, but you can like turn some gears along the way to kind of steer it. And amazingly, he got it in the first time, but he couldn't get it in ever again after that because you can look at see the design. It's like, oh, they've actually angled everything away from this center hole so that like it's every single thing was designed that way. It was like, oh, this is deception, this is a trick, this is playing on people's perceptions, this is cheating people, like every single thing like that. And it was crazy watching some of the kids. Some of them had like a healthy balance of like, oh, they'd try it once and be like, this stinks, and they'd move on. Some of them looked like gambling addicts. Like I've seen people like in Vegas casinos, the kind of people who are like sitting at a slot machine for a really long time, just kind of mindlessly pumping money in, and that's how they spend their entire day, just slowly losing money. And it's not a good thing to see. The look that those people get in their eyes, I kind of like glazed over, like given up, like but you got to keep going because you might win. That's what I saw in a lot of these kids' eyes. It was scary. On one level, I'm like, this has kind of always been this way. And maybe I just didn't see it when I was younger in these places more often. On another level, that doesn't make it right. It was really just kind of like, I don't think this is a good thing. And the psychology that it's training us to have, it made me really uneasy. The fact that this is like a thing that is ostensibly for children, seeing actual children like be taken in by the scam and the addiction of those feelings, it was kind of messed up. But yeah, it definitely made me think like, man, I do wish Apple would be better on the App Store about that stuff, because I don't think it's right or in good taste or in keeping with the brand they want to have that Apple makes so much money off of casino games for children in the App Store that use real money and play on people's psychology to basically set it on fire. Like all this stuff with, like the loot boxes and all the weird gem conversions and all this stupid stuff. Like it's just ripping people off, and Apple knows it, but they make so much money that they convince themselves not to care. And in my opinion, that's not good enough. They should do better. They know better. I know the people there know better. I know that they care about their brand. They care about what it represents. They don't want to be a mindless casino for children, but they are. And I really wish they would do better. I wish they would have the courage.
There it is.
To actually stand up for that and say, you know what? Even though we're making a killing by taking a third of this kind of dirty money that's going through us, maybe we'd be better off overall for our brand and for our customer experience and for what's right in the world to maybe put more strict controls on a lot of that stuff and make it a lot more honest and a lot more consumer friendly. But they won't do it. I wish they would.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've been to Dave & Buster's. And, I remember when I was really little, my grandparents, actually, they still live there. They lived in a little teeny town outside of Scranton, which you would know is the place that The Office takes place, the American Office anyway. And they lived in this little tiny town outside Scranton, and I remember that there was a arcade there that was called Family Fun Center, and it was one of these sorts of things. It was like a lowbrow version of Dave & Buster's, where or like a really crummy Chuck E. Cheese, where most of the games, they had regular arcade games if memory serves. Most of the games are these ticket dispensing things. And I would put, like, I wasn't given infinite money, but, left to my own devices, I would put infinite money into these different games like skee ball and a bunch of others in order to try to win, as you had said a little while ago, the world's crummiest prizes.
Oh, yeah.
They were so bad and so awful, but I would rack up those tickets. And I remember Family Fun Center would give you like laminated cards, like about the size of a credit card if you had like 1,000 tickets. And I would gather up all my tickets and I would cash them in insofar as like I would get my little card that said, oh, I would have 2,000 ticket cards and whatever. And I would save them up. And like the 3 or 4 times over the summer that I'd go to visit grandma and grandpa, like I would go to Family Fun Center and earn some more. And then eventually maybe one day I would have enough for like the prize I really, really, really wanted. And you could get like a Game Boy if you had 11 trillion tickets, but you would have had to have spent like $13,000 to have earned 11 trillion tickets. Like, it was a mess. But as a kid, I mean, I loved it. Gosh, I love that place more than almost anywhere in the world. And I loved when we went and visited grandma and grandpa, because a lot of times we would go into Family Fun Center and get to play for a couple hours. And I loved it so much.
You mentioned on the last show, I was happy that I was born when I was, in terms of the various technological arcs and the internet and everything, that I got to see them when they develop. Well, this is one instance where I'm glad I was born when I was, because I got to experience video arcades before they got crappy. And I didn't get to see them transition into being crappy, and I didn't get to experience the crappy. So yeah, my video arcades were coin-op video game machines that you put quarters into, not tokens, but real live quarters. And the video games were really good. And at that time, the best video games you could find anywhere on the planet were arcade games, which made sense for the time because they were incredibly expensive. Like those machines, like a Pac-Man machine did not cost the same as an Atari 2600. Not even close. Like, they're very expensive. The big giant CRTs in them alone were expensive, plus the circuit boards and the fact that they were custom.
And maintenance. Like, you'd have to have people come service them because they would break all the time.
Yeah. But they made tons of money in quarters, right? So the reason, anyway, the point was like, you'd go to the arcade because you couldn't see that stuff at home, all right? And they'd try to make home versions of arcade games, and they were worse, right? And so you were willing to plunk the quarters into the machines and play them. And they sounded like video arcades. They looked like them, and they're just, there's just that experience is burned in my brain. And when they got bad, I had stopped going to video arcades. They got, eventually the industry learned you can make more money by selling people games and home consoles. And that's kind of why the games look like the way they do. The graphics on them are not as good as they are on your phone, right? They're just not, right? These huge machines, and the graphics are terrible. All right, that never used to be the case. It used to be the case that the best graphics in the world were on these extremely expensive arcade machines, right?
Unless you had a Neo Geo.
That's true.
Well,
right?
that came from arcade stuff. And Neo Geo and a couple other things. Like,
it basically was an arcade machine that you'd hook up to your TV, and you paid about as much for it as well.
When it flipped, I think, was around the Dreamcast era. Somewhere around the Dreamcast era, there was one console that was essentially they made an arcade version of a console board instead of like the other way around, and that's when you knew it had entirely flipped, and the arcade was no longer going to be the place where the best games were. It was good. Their best games were going to be on console and PC, and the arcade was going to be whatever junk was left over. There was that middle period where they tried to share the technology, and they did. There was a whole bunch of consoles that, I think mostly from Sega, that were like, it was literally the same hardware in the arcade and in the home thing. But then, honestly, I don't even know what's in those arcade things. Is it just like, an iPhone SE? Too, like inside there playing the games?
I mean, these days, yeah, it's probably like a Raspberry Pi or something.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I'm surprised you didn't mention that the other variety of things I see in modern quote unquote arcades is essentially MAME cabinets, right? Like, just, I don't know how they get away with it, but it's like, oh, here's a bunch of old video games, probably not really licensed, but who cares, in what looks essentially like a MAME cabinet, kind of like your big Space Invaders thing on a wall, but without the big screen. It's like, oh, great, I came to an arcade so I could play, emulated video games from my youth on a crappy screen. I hate those places. But yeah, no, I was there for the brief shining moment when they were good, and then I left.